Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Brajajana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jana Brajajana Ran Jamanatira Vanam Chadi Jamanatira Vanacha Jamanatira Vanam Chadi Vanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gadadha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamanatira Vanachadi. Jamanatira Vanachadi. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Hari Vajagacharya Astatarasatasi Simad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We'll cover just 2 verses this morning. And it's not going to conclude all 3 verses. The 3 verses 19, 20, 21. These are Fish Guru. Of his 24 gurus, number 17 is the fish. Here's Puijan's backward glance comment. Noting that death awaits a fish, lured into biting a fisherman's baited hook, the Avadhuta has learned not to surrender to the tongue's powerful urge. Even starving the tongue through fasting does not weaken the tongue's power. And text 21 per verse. Although one may conquer all the other senses, as long as the tongue is not conquered, it can be said that it cannot be said that one has conquered his senses. However, if one is able to control the tongue, then one is understood to be in full control of all the senses. Sounds important, huh? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments on text 20, which we'll read shortly, that we should try to control the tongue because through that one sense, the other four senses are empowered. How do we control the tongue? By developing a taste for loudly chanting the holy name of the Lord. That's his words. And the last paragraph here. The BBT purport adds to this prescription that we eat only prasad. Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, you know the song, Sharira Vidyajam. But you, dear Lord Krishna, are very kind and have given us such nice prasad to control the tongue. Now take this prasad to your full satisfaction and then glorify their lordships, Sri Sri Radha Krishna, and in love call for the help of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. We're going to text 19, the fish, where the verse reads, just as a fish, incited by the desire to enjoy his tongue, is fatally trapped on the fisherman's hook, similarly, a foolish person is bewildered by the extremely disturbing urges of the tongue and thus is ruined. And the BBT purport. The fisherman places meaty bait on a sharp hook and easily attracts the unintelligent fish who is greedy to enjoy its tongue. Similarly, people are mad after gratifying their tongues and lose all discrimination in their eating habits. For momentary gratification, they construct huge slaughterhouses and kill millions of innocent creatures. And by inflicting such atrocities, such atrocious suffering, they prepare a ghastly future for themselves. But even if one eats only the foods authorized in the Vedas, there is still danger. One may eat too sumptuously, and then the artificially stuffed belly will create pressure on the sexual organs. Thus, one will fall down into the lower modes of nature and commit sinful activities that lead to the death of one's spiritual life. From the fish, one should carefully learn the real dangers involving gratifying the tongue. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. The fish invites its death by being attracted to the meat attached to the hook of the fisherman. Taking a lesson from the fish, the introspective sages should not indulge in eating palatable food consisting of 6 kinds of taste. One cannot properly worship Krishna if one remains a servant of his tongue and genital. In this regard, we should carefully consider the following verses. One who is subservient to the tongue and who thus goes here and there, devoted to the genitals and belly, cannot attain Krishna. That's Chaitanya Charitamrita Antilila 6 to 27. Antilila 6 to. And then from the Bhagavatam, the later verse in this section, Uddhava Gita, chapter 19, the word shama or shanta rasa indicates that one is attached to the lotus feet of Krishna. Dhamma means controlling the senses and not being deviated from the Lord's service. Endurance of unhappiness is titiksha, and driti means controlling the tongue and the genitals. So he's citing those two verses as scriptural references that help one be guided to proper conduct with regard to eating. And Vishwanath Chakrabarti writes, attraction to material taste is a cause of obstacles. This he learned from the fish. Man, bewildered by his tongue, which is agitated by and difficult to control, ati pramatinya, attains death. The fish attains death by the hook with tasty bait. So now, just for variety's sake, there's a nice illustration of this. There's a fish, there's a hook, and there's the bait. And a nice lake. Just as a fish, incited by the desire to enjoy his tongue, is fatally trapped on the fisherman's hook, similarly, a foolish person is bewildered by the extremely disturbing urges of the tongue and thus is ruined. Okay, so nice illustration. Now we're going to text 20, and it's a lot of nice illustrations for text 20. Translation: by fasting, learned men quickly bring all the senses except the tongue under control. Because by abstaining from eating, such men are afflicted with an increased desire to gratify the sense of taste. Depriving the senses doesn't mean controlling the senses. And the BBT purport, this is Sri Dayadanda Maharaj in South America, because he was GBC in South America for many years. In South America, there's a saying that when the belly is full, the heart is content. Thus, one who is eating sumptuously is jolly, and if one is deprived of proper food, one's appetite becomes even more voracious. An intelligent person, however, does not fall under the control of the tongue, but rather tries to make progress in Krishna consciousness by accepting the remnants of food offered to the Lord, prasadam. One gradually purifies the heart and automatically becomes simple and austere. Paragraph. In this connection, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that the business of the tongue is to gratify itself with the varieties of flavor. But by wandering in the 12 holy forests of Brajmandala, one can become freed from the 12 flavors of material sense gratification. Nice. The 5 principal divisions of material relationships are these 5 rasas: neutral admiration, servitude, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. The 7 subordinate features of material relationships are material, humor, astonishment, chivalry, compassion, anger, dread, and ghastliness. Originally, these 12 rasas, or flavors of relationships, are exchanged between the Supreme Personality Godhead and the living entity in the spiritual world, semicolon. And by wandering in the 12 forests of Vrindavan, one can re-spiritualize the 12 flavors of personal existence. Thus, one will become a liberated soul, free from all material desires if one artificially tries to give up sense gratification, especially that of the tongue. The attempt will be a failure, and in fact, one's desire for sense gratification will increase as a result of artificial deprivation. Only by experiencing real spiritual pleasure in relationship with Krishna can one give up material desires. There was a period of time when it was kind of like a fashion for the devotees that on Ekadasi, the devotees would observe Nirjal. Now, today, some devotees do that. Some devotees do other things. But it became kind of like a fad. Like all the kids are doing it, so you gotta go do it because all the kids are doing it. But without necessarily the right purpose and without necessarily the qualification. So, one Ekadasi, in the evening, we found a brahmachari passed out in the walk-in cooler because he was so famished. He went into the cooler, offered everything, and just started stuffing his mouth and passed out in the walk-in cooler. Didn't work. It aggravated his tongue. That was pretty extreme. So here's Bhaktisiddhanta's purport, which we've already heard a little bit. Those who are attached to material enjoyment fulfill their desire for taste with the help of the tongue. If the tongue is denied its favorite tastes, it becomes greedy and agitated. An intelligent person, however, does not fall under the control of the tongue, but instead tries to make progress in spiritual life. You know, this is this thing of regulation of something. It's an urge. And then increasing spiritual happiness, pramdrishtvadavartate. And then the lower urge can be surpassed by the higher taste. Okay, here's the rasa chapter, paragraph. The business of the tongue is to seek gratification with varieties of tastes. By visiting the 12 forests of Vrindavan, however, one can become released from the desire to enjoy 12 kinds of mundane sense gratification. 5 primary material relationships, we know what they are. 7, we know what they are. In their pure form, these 12 rasas are exchanged between the living entity and Supreme Personality of Godhead in the spiritual sky. By visiting the 12 forests of Vrindavan, one can purify these 12 rasas, which are not manifested in a perverted form. In this way, one can become a liberated soul who no longer possesses material desires. If one artificially tries to renounce sense gratification, he will certainly fail. Indeed, such artificial renunciation generally results in inflaming one's material desires. And finally, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Now he's doing a little review. There's 5, from Garuda Purana, he quotes a verse. There's 5 creatures or forms of species of life that are destroyed by the 5 different sense objects. So he's doing that little review. The moth is destroyed by attraction to form because the element of fire is the basis of form. The bee is destroyed by attraction to smell. The elephant is destroyed by attraction to touch. The deer is destroyed by attraction to sound. the fish is destroyed by attraction to taste, it has been said. So here's the Garuda Purana verse. The deer, elephant, moth, bee, and fish are destroyed by the five sense objects. How can an insane person who engages all senses in five sense objects not be destroyed? The tongue, which endows the other senses with their functions by eating food, is the cause of obstacles. Therefore, one should make efforts to control it. This is explained in 2 verses. If one gives up eating, one conquers all the senses except the tongue. The urge of the tongue increases fasting. If one eats, all senses become agitated by the attachment to taste. Therefore, one must conquer the tongue. Then all the senses following it will be conquered. One can control the tongue by developing a taste for chanting loudly the name of the Lord. It is said, Uddhava Gita 2:59, Vishaya vinivartante. You all know the verse. Nirahara shidehinam rasavarjam rasopyasya pram drishtva vartate. One who refrains from eating, this is an interesting translation. One who refrains from eating also stops the sense object from functioning, but the desire for tasting remains. Having experienced the higher taste, one can stop the desire for material taste. I mean, it's translated to match the message of this verse. Okay, some more graphics. An intelligent person, however, does not fall under the control of the tongue, but rather tries to make progress in Krishna consciousness. By accepting the remnants of food offered to the Lord, prasadam, one gradually purifies the heart and automatically becomes simple and austere. So I'm going to pause for just a moment here. Enjoy reading it. Continuing with text 20. Its message nicely illustrated here. Beautiful painting. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati states that the business of the tongue is to gratify itself with the varieties of flavor. But by wandering in the 12 forests of Brajamandala, Vrindavan, one can be freed from the 12 flavors of material sense gratification. And here's a really interesting graphic. The 5 principal divisions of material relationships are neutral admiration, servitude, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. And the 7 subordinate features of material relationships are material humor, astonishment, chivalry, compassion, anger, dread, and ghastliness. Interesting painting. Okay, we have to see this painting. You've seen this painting before, perhaps. It's really nice. Krishna and Balaram, the cowherd boys and cows in Vrindavan by the side of Govardhan Hill. That's what's up there on the right. The cows grazing on the hill. Nice painting. Originally, these 12 rasas, or flavors of relationships, are exchanged between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity in the spiritual world. And by wandering in the 12 forests of Vrindavan, one can re-spiritualize the 12 flavors of personal existence. Thus, one will become a liberated soul, free from all material desires. And here we see Dhruva and Vishnu. Only by experiencing real spiritual pleasure in relationship with Krishna can one give up material desires. A couple of comments. It's nice to know the scriptural basis for this comparison, because I heard many times Prabhupada make this comparison of the senses and sense objects, and when creature is attracted by this sense, it brings their death, and that creature brings their death. Then would say that the human form of life, all 5 senses are strong, so it's so easy to be trapped by the attraction, the allurement of the senses and sense objects. So one has to be very careful. And the whole of the yoga system must include control of the mind and senses. So we're hearing on, don't overindulge and don't under. So, where's the balance? And that's a natural question. And then the answer is what's necessary, what's necessary. And again, this same question we discussed the other day. As is suitable for you as an individual, so you can maintain peacefully and progressively, while you're always striving to, or hankering for reducing and the material involvement part, and increasing, maximizing the spiritual involvement part. And that's the right combination. And for each person, it's going to be a little bit different. But that's the formula. And we have to be mindful as we're practicing bhakti, performing, bhakti yogis, the peril of sense indulgence. And so each one of the senses, one by one. So this is the Avaduta Brahman discussing with the king. He's not, he didn't go to the king came to him, but still the king needs to know these things, and a person needs to know these things. A progressive person needs to know these things. So this step back a little bit further again, and the question that Uddhava has raised is, how can I know you? And Krishna says, by bhakti process that's detached from sense enjoyment. And Uddhava says, well, it's really difficult to, when you're attached, to not be involved in material enjoyment. So how do you do that? And so Krishna is telling the story of the Avaduta Brahmin instructing the king how to do that. So it's by sound vibration, we've been saying, and it's the sound vibration in this case is the teachings of an Avaduta Brahmin to a king, or Krishna teaching Uddhava the same, and Shukadeva Goswami speaking to Maharaj Pariksit. It's whatever the source, coming from proper disciplic succession method, that's the method. The hearing of instructions and dedicating oneself to that sound vibration, namanta eva, from our teachings of Brahma, namanta eva, sanmukaritam bhavadiyavartan. But the process that we're doing just now is the process. And we repeatedly hear and try to assimilate what we're hearing. And the attachment to Krishna and detachment from the temporary will gradually follow. It starts with hearing Harikatha. And that hearing of Harikatha doesn't need to change to some other process. It deepens. If you're interested, you can take a look. There's a paragraph in text 8 of Sri Ishopanishad that describes going from zero to perfection. And it starts with Harikatha. And then it just deepens in different stages of absorption in Harikatha. Text 8, Ishopanishad. That's the how-to answer before people ask the how-to question. Let's see if there's some discussion. Are we on? It's on. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This developing of higher taste, so they generally see the tendency that in the name of eating prasadam, but still there is no control of the time. I'm eating prasadam, but I'm still seeking variety, and varieties of prasadam available, still that the tendency to enjoy is not diminishing, even though I'm still eating prasadam. So the development of higher taste, it's on the, as you said, it develops by hearing process.
Well, from hearing comes application of what you heard. For example, while eating, you can meditate on the fact that this is Krishna Prasadam, which is not different than Krishna and is sanctifying my existence. Or you can meditate on how nicely was this prepared. I mean, a really nice example really of this, the second one I just said is Mother Jamuna not only was an expert cook, but she was an expert connoisseur of flavors. No, the way that Bhakti Siddhanta is describing it is quite on the other side. Rather than being attracted to flavors, but how to be appreciative of the variety of flavors, not just by eating, but by tasting this flavor, that flavor, and appreciating the variety of flavors. It's something, maybe something like an artist that understands how different colors can be mixed or to make different effect, or how a musician, a refined musician, can understand how different methods of making sound music can have different effect. Just yesterday, anecdotal, but someone sent me a link of Badahari in his home using an electronic keyboard, using both hands, because when you play harmonium, you can only play with one hand. The other hand is pumping. So with two hands, I was watching his hands, they're all over the keyboard. And, singing the Guruvastakam prayers. He is by training and by his nature, he's a musician. So he can enjoy music in a different. So, but there can be the material enjoyment part. But it goes to the bhakti element. I'm responding to your question by expressing that the bhakti element is how to go further with controlling the tongue by taking prasadam. How has Krishna been pleased? Were there different ways to please Krishna and become absorbed in the bhakti element?
This meditation that the other day you were trying to answering one of the questions about pleasing the senses of the Lord, how to please the senses of the Lord while engaging with the senses is just the meditation in intention.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, there's others. Like, what went into making this nice? There's the ingredients, but there's also the bhakti. I'm just responding to your question. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Guru. So we were taught the base lecture we were referring about 12 Brajamandalas. So is that like for each of the while performing the devotional service, we should relish to taste those kind of that
They should relish what?
relish the like when we are performing any devotional service, even while eating the sun, the taste should be while relishing it. We should relish those 12 Brajamandalas.
No, that's not what's being said. That's kind of gymnastic. It's there's the Bhakti Siddhanta is being very rasa inspired. That is to say, there's taste of the tongue and there's taste of relationships. And the material relationships have these 12. And so by going to the 12 forests of Vrindavan, the hankering for the happiness of 12 material rasas will diminish, and because the happiness of spiritual connection with Krishna will have increased. Okay?
Krishna Guru, I think my question is, so we know, learning this about different material. So we are learning this about these things to have bhakti, to cultivate bhakti, and we need bhakti to go deeper into this knowledge.
Yes,
So
very good.
somewhere I feel that they are like Legos that we have to put these things in place to go further.
Yes, yes.
So knowledge is this bhakti, cultivates them.
You want to know what comes first?
Comes first and how
The seed of bhakti comes first. Supposing someone hasn't had devotee association. Supposing that's the case. That's not your case, but supposing someone has no bhakti association. So the Vedas give them some opportunity to progress towards a better eligibility when bhakti does come in, they come in contact with bhakti. So in that sense, knowledge gives an assist. Or I like the example, it's taking dry wood, the wet wood, and making it dry before you put it on the fire. But if you put even a wet piece of wood on a fire, it's going to dry. So bhakti is for us, where we have contacted bhakti. Bhakti is the essence, and there are assists, not even limbs of bhakti, but the things that are assisting bhakti. Bhakti isn't dependent upon them, but they may assist bhakti. Bhakti is independent. So the answer to your question is these things may assist. Because remember who's speaking, and remember who's being spoken to. It's Krishna speaking to Uddhava, or Krishna speaking to you by speaking to Uddhava. And so there's bhakti inside. And the question that's being asked is, how to grow that bhakti so that I can know you? Well, knowledge and detachment will help when you're feeling attached. The essence is bhakti. The essence is the knowledge and detachment. Jnana vairagya is not the essence. The essence is bhakti. So what comes first? Bhakti. For you? You go to chapter 12, Bhagavad Gita. If you can't do that, do this. If you can't do this, do the other thing, and so forth. But one who has a contact with bhakti and some attraction for bhakti, then that's where we go. And the other things are to help nourish their assistance of the essence. So stay with the essence. And stay fixed on the essence. I mean, when we're hearing these points of knowledge and control of the senses, the essence is not the knowledge and detachment. The essence is bhakti. There to assist bhakti. Okay? Okay, online?
Holy Mataji, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. This is related to the connection between controlling tongue with the 12 flavors of material sense gratification. So these 12 flavors are not directly related to the controlling of the tongue. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. That's it. Okay.
Cool. This question hasn't fully
Okay, they're still typing. Well, I'll just dwell on that a little bit more. I mean, because it's now come up as in two questions. Can one take the understanding that Bhaktisiddhanta combined the 12 forests, and the 12 material tastes with the tongue. And the only connection that I can see is in a param drishtvanda vartate, that is, the happiness that comes from feeling a connection with Krishna makes it easy, or it's a byproduct of that feeling connection with Krishna, that I can more easily control the senses, starting with the tongue. But it's indirect, it's not direct, the connection. Are we still waiting for the...
Shraddha Prabhu. It is said, one may cleanse himself daily by taking a bath in water. But if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad Gita, for him the dirt of material life is altogether vanquished. Gita Mahatmya 3.
The what?
Gita Mahatmya 3.
Okay.
But from these sections we can understand it requires a lot of regulation to come to higher platform. May I know how we can understand these two different?
Sure. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be going to New Jersey. And someone may, contact Shankadari and said, did Maharaj go to New Jersey? And he could say, yes, he's gone to New Jersey. But I just got in the car, and I'm not in New Jersey yet. It's going to take 4 hours. But the common expression is, he's gone to New Jersey. So, similarly, to say one has achieved such and such can be understood that they're on their way. They're on the path to such and such. Like Prabhupada's expression, there's only time separating. How many temples? 108. There's only time separating. He had 3. It's that kind of an understanding. There's a phrase in Sanskrit that means exaggeration. It's called arthavad. And in some cases there are specific, if you do this, you get that kind of, and our acharyas say some of those are specifically presented to encourage people in that direction. So there's 3 categories. There's exaggeration, there's you're on your way, and there's the actual attaining the goal. And a statement like this one is the middle one. Just take bath once and you're there. You're on your way to there. That's it. Prabhupada Ki.